Я не услышала, что ты сказал?
Я ничего.
Ага. Ждем.
Okay, so if you are ready, you can start.
I am. How do you want to do it? Do you want to just pick questions to ask, or do you want me to read through some of the questions?
You can read them, yeah.
Okay, so give me a minute. Let me just have a look down.
Yeah, don't worry.
So I'll just start from the questions that I can see. So the first question I can see is, have you tried EdLoop? And the answer to that is very easy. The answer is no. I haven't even heard of EdLoop, to be honest. And part of me, there's a little bit of me that thinks must make a mental note and check out what EdLoop is. There's another, probably larger part of me that just feels life's too short. And for me, I only really go looking for new tech stuff if it's going to help me solve particular problems that I know I'm having, okay? And I mean, I teach online, like I'm doing 16 hours a week at the moment teaching online. And I use Zoom, I use breakout rooms, and I use Word documents to record the new language. And I don't feel the need for anything else. I'm sure there are all kinds of other bits and pieces out there that teachers add to their classrooms. I feel a bit like all the tech, like I do about books of recipes and games and activities. It's like there are millions of things you could do in the classroom, but why do you want to do them and how do they improve your teaching? And for me with teaching, the real thing is about the communication, the talking to the students, and the ways of getting language to them to help them say those things they're trying to say better. So I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm bombarded with information about new tech tools and tech toys that other people are using. Last week, I spent a whole day looking at Jamboard and things people are doing with Jamboard. And in the end, I just kind of felt like, yeah, you could do those things if you want, but I don't feel like my own teaching is missing anything by not doing those things. So I haven't, no. And I'd love to say I'll have a look at it, but honestly, I probably won't. So, next question was from Yulia. Is it possible to use the Russian language to introduce new grammar or complicated expressions? It is obviously possible to do. I think sometimes it's probably a good thing to do as well. I think one of the ways to think about this is, what are the problems with vocabulary and grammar? Okay, obviously meaning is one of the problems, but I think meaning is a relatively small problem compared to the problem of seeing how the grammar or the vocabulary works in action and practicing using it in meaningful contexts. So I think if you've got a new expression that comes up and you're maybe trying to explain it and students are still looking confused and you're thinking, oh, sometimes it's just easier to give a Russian equivalent. Or sometimes students will do it anyway. This week I was teaching the expression that threw a bit of a spanner in the works. And I was explaining it, and one of my students suddenly said, oh, we have a Russian expression to put a stick in the wheel. And one of the other students said, how do you say that in Russian? Oh, it's that. Oh. So, I mean, this is with really advanced level students who are basically bilingual. They're still doing this thing of connecting the meaning to an expression in their own language. So if it helps you get to the meaning quicker and it clarifies things, I don't see any problem in using the Russian. The issue then is, what do you then do with the language in English? So what we ended up doing, or will be doing next week, is, can you think of situations that have put a time when something put the spanner in the works, when what happened? For example, we were going to run a summer school last year in London, but COVID threw a spanner in the works and we had to postpone it. That's one example from me. Can you think of your own time? So the meaningful engagement with the language and the personalization comes later. If the Russian helps you get the meaning across, fine. And then it gives you more time to deal with the speaking. In the same way with some grammatical things, you might have a piece of grammar like, I don't know, have you ever seen it before? And the students are panicking, going, what's the grammar? And you're saying, oh, it's present perfect, from the past to now. In Russian, we would say blah, blah, blah. In English, they do it like this. I think that's fine, just to clarify the basic meaning. On the understanding that, what then needs to happen is you meet further examples, you have further meaningful practice of those things in English. But I think if you are a bilingual teacher and you speak Russian and English, and you're teaching English to Russian-speaking students, it's crazy not to use Russian sometimes. I mean, if you're forcing yourself to never use Russian, your students will be using Russian in their heads. They'll be whispering to each other, how do you say it in Russian? Oh, like that, okay. So for me, it just seems more sensible to use your first language in a principled way, not too often, when it helps you deal with things that aren't the most important things to worry about. Okay. I think you can also then use Russian to revise and recycle things. So, if you've taught something like that threw a spanner in the works, next lesson, give the Russian expression. Can you remember it in English? The good students will remember, it's different in English. The bad students will say, put a stick in the wheel. So no, that's the Russian. The English, throw a spanner in the works. Good, it's different, isn't it? So you can use the Russian to help you move between the two languages and to check, can you remember how it's different from the Russian to the English? I think that's a very sensible way of doing things if you're working with monolingual classes. Let me just move down again. Sorry, I lost the place where I was. Where am I? So the next question was, what's the best proportion of drill and productive speech exercises? I don't have a fixed answer to that. I think a little bit of drilling is probably a good thing. Particularly when you're working with lower level classes. When I'm introducing new bits of grammar or new phrases, I will often do a little drill and help students say them. Productive speech exercises. I think there needs to be some time within the lesson where students have a chance to try to produce or interact meaningfully with the new language that they've encountered. Okay, I don't like to say a fixed proportion of the time, but I think there should be time, whether you've been looking at vocabulary or grammar, or after a listening or after a reading, where you do some kind of personal response or personal interaction in a meaningful way with some of that language. What are the best examples of each type according to a lexical approach? I mean, I think just practicing conversations. So at low levels, the best examples are little controlled practice conversations. So it might be, if you're doing a very low level class, your practice is just, have you been to? Yes, no, when, what was it like? Okay, and you do a little practice where you talk in pairs. Have you been to Chelyabinsk? Yes. When? 3 times. 10 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. What was it like? It was good. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. Have you been to Irkutsk? No. Have you been to St. Petersburg? Oh, many times. What was it like? Great. I love it. It's one of my favorite cities. Okay, and you just do that. And that's a kind of, very sensible practice for a low-level student. With high-level students, I think it's more personal. So it will be things like, can you think of a time when a situation threw a spanner in the works? Why? What happened? Can you think of something that a celebrity who has become implicated in a scandal? What happened? Okay, so it's just, again, it's asking questions about the language that students can respond to in a meaningful, personal kind of way. I think those are good practices, not the only practice. Which tasks for vocabulary recognition, which should come after a drill, can you offer? I'm not sure what's meant there, Olga, by vocabulary recognition. I think what needs to happen is students need to encounter vocabulary in context over time, do meaningful things with that vocabulary in context over time, and also do different kind of tests. So, next lesson, I might just give students 10 sentences, and it might be things like, we were planning to move house last year, but COVID put a ... in the works. Okay? And I just check if you can remember the missing word or not. Another lesson, I might just give some personal questions saying, has there ever been a time in your life when something threw a spanner in the works? When? What happened? So I think it's just ensuring repeated encounters with vocabulary as far as possible. You won't be able to do it with every piece of vocabulary, and I don't think you should expect students to remember or be able to produce every piece of vocabulary, but it's just making sure there's repeated encounters with things over a period of time in meaningful ways. Okay, oh God, I keep clicking the wrong thing and losing the question. Sorry, give me a second. Where are we? What is the lexical approach to teaching English? How do you use it and what does it include? Whoa, this is from Ekaterina. So I think first and foremost, a lexical approach is a way of thinking about language. It's an approach to language. And it's an approach to language that means thinking about vocabulary and grammar as being interdependent and reliant on each other. When I first started teaching, I used to think, this is a grammar lesson, this is a vocabulary lesson. In the vocabulary lesson, I never used to think much about the way in which those words were used and the grammar those words would work with, the other words those words would go with, what students were going to do with that vocabulary or how they might hear it used. When I was teaching grammar, I never used to really think about, but how does this grammar work in normal everyday conversations? And what are the most typical ways in which the students are going to use it? I just used to think about manipulating the form, doing exercises. I walk the dog is walked by me. All kinds of mad things like this, because I thought I was practicing grammar. For me, a lexical approach just means thinking about how the grammar and vocab interact in meaningful ways in conversations that are relevant to the students at the levels I'm teaching them. So, at a low level, that might mean today we're going to talk about your holidays. Did you have a good holiday? Did you go anywhere? Oh, who did you go with? What was it like? What was the weather like? What did you see? How long were you there for? And that basically we just look at grammar and vocabulary together to help students have those conversations better. Years ago, I would have looked at that as I'm practicing past simple questions or something like that. Now I just think I'm helping students have better conversations about their last holiday. And I don't think about this is a vocabulary set for this. This is the grammar needed for this. I think about what's the conversation? What does it look like? How can I show it to the students? Break it down, build it up, get them to try and have the conversation themselves. So I think that's what a lexical approach is for me. At a higher level, it means when we're doing readings or listenings or speaking activities, I'm always looking for bits of language that might be new for you. So, you know, if one of my students says something like, there is a lot of corruption here and it increases, I might say, yeah, I know what you mean. Corruption is rife here and it's on the rise, okay? Same meaning, I'm just rewording it slightly and giving you slightly more specific, slightly higher level vocabulary to help you say what you're trying to say. So it's just that. I mean, that's all it really is for me. It's that way of thinking all the time about how can I give students the grammar and vocabulary that will help them say what they wanted to say better. The next question was from Yulia Rudakova, which was, what are the peculiarities of a lexical approach while working with young learners? Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think particularly with young learners, you probably want to avoid teaching too much explicit grammar. You know, if you're teaching 6-year-olds, you don't want to be sitting there doing controlled practice written exercises on second conditionals. Probably what you're doing is a lot of storytelling, a lot of kind of, you tell the story, then you half tell it, then the students tell it and you help them tell it. You do lots of little role plays, you know, hello, can I buy some milk? Certainly. How much is that? 50 rubles. Here's 100. Here's your change. Thank you. Hello, can I buy some bread? Certainly. How much is that? You know, you're doing a lot of this kind of little game playing and little role playing. You're telling stories with the students where maybe, you know, you tell the story of Goldilocks, and the second time you tell it, you kind of say, and the little bear said, who? Yeah, who's been sleeping in my bed? And then Mummy Bear said, that's right, who's been sleeping in my bed? And the Daddy Bear said, who's been sleeping in my bed? And you're teaching that because that's the grammar and the vocabulary that you need to tell that story. You're not teaching it as the present perfect continuous and doing exercises on it. You're doing it as a story that's fun to tell and fun to act and to rebuild, okay? So in a way, it's like a very pure kind of lexical approach where you're not separating the grammar and the vocabulary, you're not doing exercises, you're not presenting the past perfect continuous or, you know, present continuous for future arrangements. You're just talking, practicing, telling stories, doing songs, maybe doing, you know, total physical response stuff where it's like, okay, stand up, ride a horse. Okay, good. Now ride a bicycle. Okay, good. Now play football. Good. Now play basketball. Now go swimming. Good. And then you do that and they shout out what you're doing. So it's very much just working from language in the way that you work with your own children, if you have children, when they're learning Russian. You know, they don't learn Russian, which is, you know, way more grammatical and scary than English is. They don't learn that by you giving them grammar exercises. They learn that by you talking to them. You know, kids kind of say, want milk. And you say, oh, do you want some milk? I'll get you some milk. Here you go. Here's your milk. Okay. And through the process of doing that a lot over time, the students learn how to add grammar and vocabulary together. What you don't do is go into those classes expecting grammatical accuracy, because that's madness. You know, native speaker kids don't produce grammatically accurate sentences until they're like 5, 6, 7. So where are we? What course with the lexical approach would you recommend for adult students with a starter level? Oh, thank you for asking. I thought you'd never ask. I would recommend one that we prepared earlier, which is that one, Outcomes Beginner. Okay, available in Russia through Onara, through Bookbridge. That would be what I would go for with those groups. When am I going to visit Chelyabinsk and Surgut? I've never been to Surgut, actually. I don't know the answer to either of those questions because obviously at the moment everything's a bit crazy, and we're still on lockdown in London. So, you know, hopefully before too long. So Svetlana has a question. We fell in love with the lexical approach. What would you recommend? Making new collocation lists with students or give them prepared ones? That's quite an interesting question. So I think generally what I would do is two things. I like the students to try to learn the language they meet in the book. On top of that, I like them to try to learn the language that comes up in the class. So I look at the language that emerges in the classroom as a record of the interaction between the students, the course book, and the teacher. So as I'm going through vocabulary exercises, you know, it might be quite low level vocab exercises. I'm still asking questions about the language. I'm maybe adding some more examples. When students are practicing and speaking, I'm helping them to say things better and I'm writing things on the board. Generally for me, those will be whole sentences. Okay. So it might just be something like, you know, like I said earlier, like, how long were you there for? What was it like? What was the weather like? You know, it was great. It was sunny every day. It was terrible. It rained the whole time. Okay. And the problem is something like it rained the whole time. It's not really a collocation. You know, you've got the whole time, which is a little chunk, but I would like students to try to learn what was the weather like. Great, it was sunny every day. Terrible, it rained the whole time. I'd like them to try and learn all of that things together. So generally, I would say I provide the language input in the classroom, and I then sort of test and recycle that stuff later on, rather than getting them to produce lists of collocations themselves. I kind of feel like that's my job as the teacher, to guide and provide things for them. I've just seen a question come up in the chat, so I'll deal with that next. Outcomes and roadmap. Outcomes is better. Would be my simple answer to that, Oksana. Outcomes was very much our baby, and we wrote all 6 levels of it. And as a result, there's a consistency of approach, and when we're writing upper intermediate, we know what we've included at intermediate and pre-intermediate, and we know what we're recycling, which language we can revisit. With roadmap, we did 2 levels, B1 plus and B2 plus. It was very much the publisher's baby rather than mine, and I'm much happier with outcomes, and I think it's a more useful and fruitful book to use personally. You know, we did the best we could with roadmap, but I think there are lots of problems with the way it's designed, and I think particularly at the higher level, way too much grammar that's not particularly useful, not very easy to practice, and kind of weighs the book down a little bit, and at the same time not enough vocabulary that I think is really what makes the difference at those levels. So I'll go back to where I was. What else have we got next? Hugh, tell me, sorry, that was the collocations question. Yeah, the idea is about how to work with the vocabulary builder in outcomes, okay? The best way to answer that is I'm going to put a link in the chat, okay? Because I've written a blog post about this, and I think it tells you a lot more than I can tell you in one go. Those of you who use outcomes, you might know about the vocabulary builder. If not, I'll put a link in here to everybody. Feel free just to open that and save that. How do you motivate students to learn? So when you think back to your own experience at high school, okay, and think about the things you enjoyed learning and think about the things you hated learning. If you're like me, and I think most people are probably like this, you hated most of your classes, okay? I hated chemistry, maths, physics, didn't really like geography. Later, as I got older, I learned to become really interested in things that I wasn't interested in at school. The subjects I liked, like history and English, not French, didn't enjoy French at all. The subjects I liked and I was motivated to learn more about in school, I liked for three main reasons, I think. The teacher treated us like human beings. The teacher listened to us, asked us questions, valued our ideas, valued our opinions, left space for us in the classroom, rather than saying, this is the level of the subject, you must come to me. What these teachers did was to say, okay, so you're here. Okay, what do you think about blah? Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, and if you think about that, then you can get to this. And they started from where we were and they brought us up to the level rather than making us feel like idiots because we hadn't got ourselves to the level already. They told us stories. They connected what we were learning to everyday things. So even when we were learning about 15th century history, our history teacher would be saying things like, and that's why when you drive around the countryside, just round here, what you notice is lots of little fields with stone walls around them. That only started to happen because of this thing that happened 600 years ago. And so for me already, it's like, wow, that connects to my world, my reality. When I was learning French, which I hated at school, the reason I hated it was because I just couldn't imagine saying most of the things I was learning in French. Just what is the Tour de France? The Tour de France is a bicycle race which takes place every year in August. Why do I need to know how to say this in a foreign language? Who's going to ask me this? I felt like it was distant and remote and abstract, and the teacher never asked us questions about ourselves in French. The teacher never there wasn't even, where did you go for your last holiday? What was it like? It was just like, Marie-Claude and Pierre went on holiday to Bourg-en-Bresse. It's like, I don't care. They're imaginary people who went to a place I know nothing about in a foreign country. So I think you motivate students by connecting the language to them and their experiences and their reality. You motivate them by talking about yourself, telling your own stories, showing how what you're teaching connects to your life in the hope that that helps them connect it to their life. You don't overcorrect, you don't over expect, and you do lots and lots of soft testing where you maybe gap some words on the board. Do you smoke? No, I to, but I stopped a few years ago. Anyone remember the missing word? I used to. Good, you remembered. You're learning. Great. That's testing, but in a non-scary, non-confrontational kind of way. So lots of things like that, I think. Those are the main ways I think you motivate students. And that's what motivated me to love the subjects that I loved when I was at school. So the next question I've got here is from Elena Dementova. Taking into account outcomes are designed as self-study books. They're not. They're designed as classroom books. There are workbooks that go with the outcome series, which are self-study books. What would you recommend for teaching online? Well, it depends is the answer, okay? So if you're teaching like 3 hours a day with the same class online, I would say use a course book, and I would be stupid not to say use outcomes in that situation. depends what you're doing. If you're doing an hour a week, I would say probably the best thing to do is lots of speaking and help the students say what they're trying to say better by listening to them and saying, yeah, I know what you mean, and feeding that new language in yourself. When I'm doing my own teaching online, even when I'm using the course book, what we do is the students read the 2 pages at home. They bring in any questions about the language they've got. And in the hour or the hour and a half we have together, we basically just do the speaking sections from the book, and I listen and feed in new language and help them say things better. So I would say online learning is different from classroom learning because, you know, you can't do certain things. You can't really say, now do the reading, because when the students are doing the reading, I can't see what they're doing. I can't see what they're underlining. I can't go round the room and check and help out with things and explain vocab. I don't usually like students to do things like grammar exercises or vocab exercises in the online class because they're stuck sitting there on their own, you know, face down, and I can't help them with things. So for me, that stuff should probably be best done at homework. Oh, I can hear someone's baby somewhere in the background. Oh, but mute it. So yeah, I mean, use a book, but I think most of the time in online classes, you want to be doing lots of speaking and helping students say things better and feeding in new language, rather than sitting there working through a book in the way that you can do when you're in a face-to-face classroom. So where are we? What's next? Oh, I keep clicking the wrong thing and losing the question. Sorry, give me a second. I'm an idiot. Yeah, there was a second question there. What online instruments, apart from Zoom, do you personally use for teaching one-to-one classes or groups of students? Sites, apps? Nothing. I use breakout rooms. I use my students. And I use material that I bring to the classroom or provide before the classroom. And I use a Word document where I write down new language and then email that to the students afterwards. I literally don't use anything else. I don't see any problems with that I need other technological solutions to at the moment. So I'm very low tech, and I, you know, rather than faffing around moving between different sites and apps and things, I would rather spend that time listening and talking and saying, yeah, I know what you mean, and helping people say things better. So, you know, if you're not one of those people that has 54 apps or tech tools up your sleeve, don't worry. Okay. Horizontal and vertical development from Aliona. Yeah, so the way I think about this, Aliona, okay, is it's to do with what people say using particular bits of vocabulary, okay? So say you're teaching a pre-intermediate level class and the topic is food, okay? And maybe what you're teaching is something to eat, okay? Well, a horizontal development means thinking about what the person who uses the word something to eat will say next. So it might be, I'm really hungry. Are you? Do you want to get something to eat? There's a nice Thai place round the corner. Okay, so you're kind of you're thinking, if I say something to eat, what's the question? Okay, what might I also say next? If you're thinking about vertical development, it's thinking about it in terms of I say, the other person says, I say, the other person says. So the vertical development might be, do you want to get something to eat? Yeah, okay. Do you have anywhere particular in mind? Yeah, there's a really good Georgian place round the corner. I go there a lot. Oh, right. I'm actually a vegetarian. Do you think they have non-meat dishes? Yeah, I'm sure they do. Georgian food is good like that. Okay, so it's thinking about it in terms of if I use that question, what do I say next, developing it horizontally, and it's thinking about it in terms of the conversation. So if you think about something like, it rained the whole time, okay? So if I'm teaching it rained the whole time, you know, pre-intermediate level class, intermediate class, horizontal development might be, the weather was terrible, it rained the whole time, we didn't go out much, we just stayed in the hotel. Vertical development would be, what was the weather like? It was terrible. It rained the whole time. Oh no, so what did you do? We just stayed in round the hotel all the time. What else could we do? God, that's awful. What a shame. Okay, so it's just thinking about it like that. Like, what do you use this language to do in conversation? What's said before? What's said next? And you know, that's probably very similar to what you would say having those conversations in Russian. Yeah. So it's just thinking, how does this conversation work? What do we do with this? So where are we next? 1 second. How would you recommend learning irregular verbs? So I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with students being given little verb tables and learning, say, at elementary level. You know, there are lots of very common verbs in English which are irregular. See, saw, seen, go, went, been, you know, that kind of thing. That's fine. That doesn't take you very far, okay? That's useful. It's useful to know that the past tense of see is saw, and the past participle, the third form, the past participle form is seen. Okay, you need to know that. Just knowing that doesn't help you say very much. So what you might then think about is 3 or 4 things. You need to see that language in context over time with different collocations, with different nouns. If you're teaching seen, well, okay, what's the context you're practicing it in? So, okay, have you seen? Well, maybe it's, have you been to Russia before? Yes. Have you seen Red Square? Yes, I have. Have you seen, I don't know, you know, the River Yenisei? Yeah, I have. I've been there a couple of times, actually. Have you seen, you know, St. Basil's Cathedral? Yes, I have. Okay. So what is it you want to practice? Maybe in another class, you might be talking about movies. Write down 5 films you love, walk around, find people who have seen those films, have conversations about them. You know, have you seen Parasite? No, I haven't. Have you? Is it good? Have you seen Parasite? Yes, I have. Oh, me too. What did you think of it? Okay. So really the way you learn that stuff is the same as you learn anything else. In context, with vocabulary and other bits of grammar, through meaningful practice and exposure over time. But I don't think there's a problem with starting from see, saw, seen, you know, do, did. It's just that in order to learn how to use that stuff better, you need to, you know, even when you're a high level learner, you don't need me to tell you this, you will still find new collocations or new phrases using very, very simple past participles, say, or past simple forms of irregular verbs. You know, so you might learn something like got, yeah? Well, get, got, or gotten, doesn't matter which one, okay? You can learn that as a basic fact. Well, there are millions of things that people got. And even when you get to upper intermediate or proficiency, you're still adding to your knowledge of things that I got. Okay. So it might be, it rained the whole time, I got soaked. Okay. Well, you probably already know that got is the past tense of get, but did you know that you can get soaked? So you really learn that stuff over time through other expressions, through collocations, through context, through meaningful experiences. Where are we? Yeah, lexical approach and young learners, which course book to choose. I don't have an answer to that because one, it's not the age group I really teach in. And two, I don't expect any course books particularly are coming from that place of thinking about a lexical approach. I think when you're doing young learners, so long as there are lots of stories and songs and activities and there's a kind of whole language approach to what's happening in class, they'll be fine. For levels A1, A2 teens, well, unless you're going to use outcomes elementary or outcomes beginner, I don't have any other recommendations because I know there's nothing specifically written for teenagers exclusively that starts from a lexical approach kind of point of view. Next one, doctor, it's strange, but now I see lexical approach everywhere. Am I sick? Probably. You probably need to take some time off and, you know, put an ice pack on your head and be calm. One more here. What age is it for? So again, as I said, I don't think the lexical approach is for students. I think the lexical approach is for teachers. It's a way of thinking about language and approaching language. And as a result, it's not for students of any age. It's just a way for you to think about the way you deal with language in the classroom, whatever age group you're teaching. How's English taught in public schools in England? Well, the first thing to say is not grammatically, okay? So when you're doing English at school, you tend to do a lot of literature, a lot of different kinds of texts, talking about the texts, thinking about the way the language is being used, talking about, you know, maybe sometimes, I mean, my son is 8 and he sometimes has to do, today he had to write 2 paragraphs about 2 different emperors, Roman emperors, and he had to use linking words, okay? So it was things like, you know, as a result, this was because. So, you know, he has to do little things like that, but basically he just has to kind of, you know, string 6 sentences about the Emperor Nero together. Mostly it's taught through reading and talking about things you read. Not always fiction, you know, sometimes things that you find online, newspaper articles, doing kind of digital literacy, critical awareness of, you know, which of these things are facts, which of them are opinions, how do you know they're facts, have you fact checked them, how do you fact check them, why do you think the writer used this word and not this word, what other words could they have used? So it's much more kind of working with the mechanics of the language and thinking about how you use and how you process the language. I mean, I did English literature degree, and during that time I learned, you know, I learned what assonance was, and I learned what metaphor was, and I learned, you know, what rhyming couplets were. I didn't learn what a conditional sentence was, and I didn't learn what the passive was, and I didn't learn what the future perfect continuous was. I only learned all that stuff when I did a CELTA. So, you know, learned in a very non-grammatical way, but amazingly, people still seem to end up speaking English at the end of this process. So, where are we next? Let me just move up. Oh, I think I'm on the last question here. When introducing new vocab to students, what's more effective, an inductive or a deductive method of presenting material? What's better to do first? Show them words in texts, do exercises with them, or give definitions of the words at first and apply them in practice? So my answer to that would be, it depends, okay? I think particularly when you're teaching, say, intermediate, there's different things that happen. If you're doing a reading text or a listening text and students ask you, what does this mean? Then what I will do is explain it in the context in which students have just encountered it. I'll maybe give another example that's quite similar to the example they've seen there, probably on the board or on my Word document if I'm teaching online. And then maybe I'll ask a question about that, okay? In the same way, if I'm feeding language in because of something students are trying to say. So maybe students say, I wanted to move house, but COVID, how to say, put a stick in the wheel. Ah, I know what you mean. COVID put a spanner in the works, okay? Yeah, it means put a stick in the wheel, but in English we say put a spanner in the works. I'll write that on the board. I wanted to move house last year, but COVID put a spanner in the works. And then I might ask the group, any other time that something puts a spanner in the works, can you think of some examples? I don't like the exercises which I just match these words to meanings. Even if students have encountered words in a reading text, the problem with matching them to meanings is meaning is the easy bit, okay? Meaning's the least of your problems. I prefer exercises. If you're going to do exercises, and I don't have a problem with vocab exercises, before texts, after texts, on their own, you have to recognize that a vocabulary exercise is a kind of test. And some students will know most of the answers. Most students will know some of the answers, okay? So when I'm doing a vocab exercise, like, I don't know, if I'm doing outcomes advanced, I pick it up, I have a look. So yeah, unit 60, unit 7, page 60, it's a slippery slope. Vocabulary, talking about science. Well, the first exercise is replace these words and phrases in italics with the correct form of these synonyms. It was a major breakthrough in the fight against AIDS, and you have to replace breakthrough with step forward, okay? They basically need to address the underlying cause of the phenomenon. You need to put root cause of the phenomenon. I would literally just let students try that themselves, because I don't want to assume what they know and what they don't know and bore them by explaining things before they try the exercise. I would just say, okay, I'll give you a few minutes, try it. Anything you're not sure of, ask me. I'll come round and help. Again, this is the advantage of teaching face-to-face in a real classroom. You can do that more easily than you can do it online. I'll then put them in pairs to compare their ideas. I'll then go through it and check. And as I'm going through and checking, I'm explaining, I'm maybe asking some more questions, I'm maybe giving some more examples of the things that I think were more difficult for them. What I wouldn't do is A, pre-teach all that vocabulary, B, just do exercises where they have some of those words and they just match them to meanings. The advantage of those kind of exercises you've just seen is they're whole sentences and they model typical things that students might hear said or might want to say using that vocabulary. So I think, let the book do some of the work for you. If you're using the book and it's got vocab exercises in it, just get them to do the exercise. It's a test, okay? They won't all get everything right, but they won't all get everything wrong. And usually between them, you'll get most of the answers, yeah? So this is why when you're going through the answers, it's like, use the students. So what did you get for number 1? The missing word? Ah, well done, okay? Write that up, maybe briefly explain it, maybe ask a question about it. So that's generally the way that I would approach that myself. I think, unless I missed anything, I've covered the questions that came up on VK. We've got about 10 more minutes. I've got about 10 more minutes before I have to disappear and do dinner. So if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to write in the chat box or just to ask, unmute yourself and feel free to ask. The other thing I'll do is in the chat box, I'll just put my email address there, and the website. So if you're a shy person and you haven't kind of formulated your question yet, feel free to email me. You can also, of course, find me on Vkontakter, VK, or Instagram, or Facebook, or however you want to do it. I'm always happy to hear from people and to try to give some thoughts on whatever you're worrying about. Does anyone have anything else you wanted to ask? Tell us about your courses. So we have a whole wide range of courses. The main things we're doing at the moment is a kind of advanced level speaking club, I guess. Most of the people that we're working with are so-called non-native speaker teachers of English. So generally pretty good, you know, sometimes terrifyingly good. We do the courses in blocks. So we do like a 12-week block or an 8-week block. We write all the material ourselves and we never reuse any of the material. So this week we were talking about free speech. What is it? We had some quotes about free speech. There was a reading connected to the idea of free speech. There was then something about, have you ever been on a demo, been on strike, signed a petition, little bit of stuff about this. And basically we send the material out before the class. In class, students discuss these things and we listen and we feed in new language. At the end of the class, it's only an hour, we go through the new language, students ask questions about it. We send it to the students so they have a copy of, you know, what you were trying to say in better English. And we then write revision sheets for each group to help them remember, consolidate, build upon what they've done. We also have online teacher development courses. At the moment, we've got two, one about teaching low-level learners and one about getting more from your course book. We also have a summer school that we run in London, you know, the great God of COVID permitting. We're still hoping we can run summer school this year. So we've got kind of different courses in different ways. But if you look at the website, you'll see more details of everything there. Do you plan to write a new book? Who knows? We've just actually done this little book here that some of you may have seen. It's available in e-format as well, called Grammar Nonsense and What to Do About It. We're definitely going to do some more little books like that. So I mean, here I have a little list of some things that I'm working on. I've got one on the 20 most frequently asked questions I've had about English from students over the years. I've got another one about keywords in English and how to use them. So we're going to write those as kind of self-study development books. We're hoping also that we can do a third edition of Outcomes, but the publishers are in disarray at the moment. Everything's a bit chaotic because of the COVID situation. So we need to kind of wait for the dust to settle there. Oh, I've just seen a thing saying I haven't answered all the questions under that post. I must have missed some. Give me a minute. In what direction do you think English language will change? I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, it'll definitely change because languages change all the time. In which direction? I've no idea how you would answer that question. I don't know. It'll change. It'll change. Let me have a quick look and see what I've missed on the actual site. Oh, you've got Grammar Nonsense for Kindle. That's nice to hear. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm just checking what I've missed. Sorry if I've missed your question. Give us a second. Where are we? Let me just go to the English Click site. Dun, dun, where are we? What did I miss? Yeah, the problem is half the questions are in Russian. How and why do new course books appear? That's interesting. Well, they appear because publishers need new things to sell, okay? And often the markets demand new products. Often people will change course books after 3 or 4 years of using them because they get bored, because they want to see what else is going on. They come into being because publishers decide to commission them, sometimes based on gaps in the market. So it might be, you know, people say, we need a book like this for the Russian state exams. And so the publishers say, okay, we'll get one written. They basically come into being either because of market demand or because of publisher demand. What do you do if a student keeps saying something like, what's the point of saying a bit less cheaper if I can say cheaper? Well, the point of saying a bit less expensive is it's another way of saying cheaper. If you don't like it, don't say it. I can't force you to say it. If you hear people say it's a bit less expensive, it means it's a bit cheaper. It's up to you which one you use. I don't care either way, so long as you understand both. Okay? Or if they give them some chunk and they say, will they understand you anyway? Probably yes. Okay? But if you don't want to learn any new language, do yourself a favor, save your time and money and stop coming to class. I thought you were here because you wanted to learn more English. If you want to learn more English, here's more English. Even if you don't use it yourself, you'll need to understand it when you hear other people use it or see other people use it. That's why I'm showing it to you. But yeah, you know, you can be understood by saying, want coffee, me, okay? That doesn't make you a particularly good user of English. It will get you a coffee, but no one will say, God, you speak good English. How long have you been learning? So, you know, it depends what you want. Do you only want absolute basic survival? Or do you want to get better at what you're doing? Most people want to get better at things they need to do. You know, I mean, I want to get better at driving, and I've been driving 25 years. I could still be a better driver. You know, so I like to learn new things, even if I'm not going to use them immediately. I think I've now answered all the questions, have I? Have I missed anything? Let me check. Dun, dun, dun. Newest questions. Oh, God, there's loads more. I think at this time, I'm going to have to say thank you all for the extra questions. Save them, okay? And I'll try to answer them next time. There's only 3. Phil, if you can send me the 3 now. I've just closed my thing.
Okay, I can just read them out to you.
Go on.
Yeah, okay. The first one from Alisa. What would you do in this situation? An 8-year-old who uses quite a lot of vocabulary, but who is absolutely horrible at grammar. Should I introduce more grammar through reading, listening, talking, and give more vocab? Or should I make sure that she perfects her grammar first, and after that move on to some more difficult stuff?
The former. I would say expecting grammatical accuracy from an 8-year-old is crazy. It's very unusual for that to happen. I think look at how to use the vocabulary she already knows in typical everyday ways. Most of the grammar she's going to need when you're speaking. I mean, most of the grammar you use when you're speaking is present simple, past simple, present perfect, going to, will. I mean, that's most of what you use. Even when I look at things I've given to my very high level learners, that's still most of the grammar. I mean, like if I look here, I'll just open up the last class I taught this week. Okay, I'll read you the first sentences that came up. These are really high level bits of vocabulary, but think about the grammar. I haven't had time to prepare properly, present perfect. I've only had time to flick through the article, present perfect. You've let me down, you've let yourself down, present perfect. This is why flipped learning will never catch on. Present simple. Sorry to go on about it, but it drives me mad. Present simple. To be honest, it's not really something I've ever paid much thought to. Present simple, present perfect. I mean, the grammar is not really the issue. The issue is knowing how to use the grammar and vocabulary in combination to say things. If what you're doing is the students say something in broken English and you rephrase it. So, you know, if the students, even like with very young kids, when the students kind of are saying, I butterfly, I wings, I fly, I now fly. If you're saying, oh, are you a butterfly? I'm a butterfly too. I'm flapping my wings. And then the student says, flap wings. Yeah, you're flapping your wings. If you're doing this a lot, yeah, it will start to stick and it will go in. So I would say don't panic too much about it. Just make sure there's a lot of exposure, a lot of real communication, a lot of using grammar and vocabulary in meaningful contexts between the two of you. And it will come with time, you know, patience. So fine, I'm going to do one more.
Okay, what is your favorite book on for intensive reading for intermediate learners? Yulia Chernova asks, and her favorite is Select Reading by Oxford, but she wants a bit more.
I don't have an answer to that because it really depends on the students. Okay, some students love reading fiction. Some students absolutely hate reading fiction. Some students like factual stuff. Some students won't read what they think are simplified versions of real books. They would prefer to read books written specifically for intermediate learners. All I would say is I think graded readers written for students at that level are really, really good and getting better all the time. And I think there's such a wide range of fiction and non-fiction, and increasingly books written specifically for English language learners, not, you know, Dracula, the intermediate version or whatever, that I think just make books available to your students and let them choose things that interest them. And different students will go for different books because people are different. So I'm going to vanish off.
But out comes the last one, and that's all for today.
Go on,
Okay.
last one.
Yes. So Ina Goleva asks, I've recently started working with outcomes, and both my students and I like the topics, the structure, but we are a bit disappointed with the videos. My question is about using videos in a lesson. What are your ideas about using videos in a lesson? In a lesson, yeah. Could you give examples of using videos in a lesson?
So my honest answer is, speaking as a teacher rather than the author of outcomes, I skip the videos. I basically don't do the videos myself. The videos were a kind of additional feature that we were encouraged to add because we had access to the National Geographic Video Archive. The problem we had was a series called Life had first access to them and chose all the best videos, and we weren't allowed to use anything that they'd used already. So we basically had what was left after they'd cherry-picked all of the best videos, and we had to work with that. To be honest, in my own classes, I skip the videos and I tell the students, if you want to have a look at it at home, do so, it's on the website. And I would rather spend the extra time doing a bit more speaking and a bit more vocabulary revision and a bit more human interaction. You know, I find the videos a little bit frustrating as well sometimes because of the raw material we had to work with. Don't tell my publishers I said that, but that's my honest answer. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to vanish off. I can hear that I have dinner happening in the other room. So thank you all so much for turning up. And thank you, Phil, for inviting me again. And
you're welcome.
Lovely to be part of your little community, and keep in touch. And I'll see you all again at some point. Yeah?
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Take care.
Take care.